And sometimes affairs do lead to the end of a marriage. And
Mhm.
oftentimes that there might have been issues why that relationship should have ended that have been hard to deal with. And so the affair kind of acts as an exit strategy.
Hello, everyone. I am here today with Juliane Maxwald. She's a licensed psychoanalyst and an ASEX certified therapist specializing in relationships, intimacy, and career issues. Welcome, Juliane.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
Thanks for being with us today. I want to start out by asking you, what is your 30-second origin story? So, how did you find your way into therapy, and when did you realize this is my specialty?
Such a great question. I'm going to try to do it in 30 seconds. Well, I started my education actually in art. I was an art student, and the themes that I was exploring had a lot to do with identity and power and sexuality and self. And around the latter part of my art school career, I got very interested in art therapy and psychotherapy and realized that as much as I loved art, what I was really interested in is why people made the art that they did and the process really of art making. So from there, I transitioned into a psychotherapy training program and got another degree. And so my background has always been psychoanalysis and then addiction and then couples therapy and then trauma and then therapy. And so in some ways, I feel like it's been this integrative path of me coming full circle to where I started and
Yeah.
incorporating all of these things. And sex is just such a portal into so many different aspects of how we see ourselves and experience ourselves. It's complex and rich and just a wonderful domain that I enjoy working in.
Oh, that is so great to hear. Now, I want to know, is there one trend happening in intimate health that genuinely excites you?
I am very much interested in the way that we are redefining what looks like and should be. I love the focus away from penis and vagina intercourse as, and I'm really excited by the whole notion of outer course and
Mm.
expanding what we think of as a sexual experience and really helping individuals and couples redefine what sex can look like and can experience. I find that with my male clients, taking the pressure off of their erections and this idea of performing during intercourse has just allowed them to experience pleasure in their bodies in ways that they just haven't experienced before.
Yeah.
And conversely, with my female clients, I find that helping them understand their bodies in relation to their own desire and that they can prioritize pleasure and outer course and foreplay and fantasy, and that there's a real revolution happening in
Yeah.
terms of how we're understanding what constitutes a sexual experience that is just very exciting for me.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. There's so much more on the menu besides like P and V, and
Yeah.
it's like there's a whole world to explore out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And people are so hungry for it. I find that so many couples and so many individuals are just hungry for information. I think of therapy as education that nobody really got, or and most of us didn't get. And so that's really exciting for me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All right, now, if you could teach the world one key insight about infidelity, something that could really move the needle for people, what would it be?
So, with infidelity, it's a very hard thing to understand, but I think it's really important, and is that it is so rarely about the other person, the third person, or the behavior that's being engaged in. And I mean that not to absolve people from taking responsibility or accountability for their actions, but what I mean by that is that there's so much happening under the surface of infidelity, which is a lot of what my workshop will be about. But there's so much happening under the hood of infidelity. And if we can focus on that, if people can recognize that, yes, this crisis happened and it's incredibly destabilizing, but there is an opportunity there to really understand, okay, why did this happen? What does this mean about the individual who stepped out of the relationship? Or what does it mean about what was happening in our relationship? And if we can start there and really focus there, that's where deep, deep healing and transformation can happen.
Absolutely. And now I've heard people say if your partner cheats on you, that's it. They can never be trusted again. We throw the whole thing out. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's really unfortunate. And people's initial reaction, the hurt, the anger, the disbelief, all of that is totally legitimate, 100%. But I often find that people come in and they want permission to stay. They want permission to be able to work on the relationship. They want help understanding why this happened, that this isn't really the moral failing of their partner, that it's a really complex issue that requires a lot of work and healing to be done. And sometimes affairs do lead to the end of a marriage. And oftentimes there might have been issues why that relationship should have ended that have been hard to deal with. And so the affair kind of acts as an exit strategy, like a not very productive exit strategy. I'm not a fan of just promoting the zero tolerance approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, at Shaw, we train many, many people who are wanting to work in the intimate health and relationship space. So, what's the most important thing professionals need to know about working with a client experiencing infidelity in their relationship?
There's a few things. One is that infidelity and affairs are probably one of the most destabilizing experiences anybody can go through, both
Yeah.
on an individual level and in a relational level. That it really is a crisis and there's real trauma there that needs to be worked with, contained. And so that's one piece of it. But then the other piece of it is that it's important to figure out what function, in a way, the infidelity was providing for either that individual or for the relationship system. And kind of holding both of those positions in your head as you're working with couples, for the individual, helping them deal with the crisis, while at the same time making an assessment on what exactly was going on here. Like, what was the organization around why the infidelity was happening? Because how you're going to approach healing and repair is going to look very different depending on the type of infidelity that was going on.
Become an in-demand sexual health professional. Gain expert education and become a SHA certified therapist, coach, counselor, or educator. Hit the subscribe button to learn more.
Okay, can you tell me more about the type? Like, what are different types of infidelity?
Yeah, well, this is what my workshop is going to be all about. I've kind of created 5 different types of infidelity. One is what I call attachment affairs. And that's where there is a bond, a sexual and an emotional bond that happens outside of the relationship. And oftentimes that's because there are attachment needs that are not being satisfied in the relationship, or there's conflict that's being avoided inside of the relationship. And so that's what you think of kind of typically as when somebody's having an emotional and sexual affair. But then there's erotic escape affairs, which happens when somebody is using the sexual encounter or a certain sexual behavior as a way of managing stress in the relationship. And so that can look like all kinds of things. I mean, that can be hookups, it could be going to paid sex workers, it can be an affair, more of a casual affair, a physical affair, but it's really used as a way to kind of dissociate from an issue that's happening in the relationship, and a way to relieve tension and stress and avoid addressing that deeper issue. And then there's what I call narcissistic repair affairs. And that's when there is a kind of dynamic that's happening in the relationship where there's either a power imbalance or there's vulnerability, or there's a life transition, or one person might just be feeling really undervalued, or there's maybe a desire discrepancy that's not really being talked about or looked at. But the real function of that is to revive a sense of self-worth, like sexual self-worth or emotional self-worth within the relationship. The next one is a kind of like a compulsive sexual acting out. And that can be a whole variety of things as well. But typically what's underneath it is there's maybe some unresolved trauma. There's maybe some like family of origin, shame around sex and sexuality, but it's really a kind of split off part from this person's even self-understanding. Like oftentimes the person will say, I don't even know why I was engaged with this. It's a compulsive, almost addictive kind of quality to the acting out behavior. And then lastly, there is the category that I call exit affairs, which is really affairs that function as a way to end a relationship, not in a very productive way, but it's really about not confronting directly issues in the relationship, or just feeling as though the relationship has come to an end and not really knowing how to address it or deal with it. So I get into all of these in a lot more detail in the workshop, but I find that if therapists can have a little bit of a template or a roadmap for how to conceptualize the different affairs, it just can help really ground them in understanding, like, what am I looking at? What function did this serve? How do I work with it? How do I help people heal and repair in a way that's going to actually provide deeper structural kind of growth and transformation, as opposed to just a quick fix is not the right word, but instead of just focusing on like solving the external issue.
Yeah, I think this is fascinating work. I never would have thought there were different categories of infidelity. And I think that's very important to differentiate each one. This is going to be a really interesting talk.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. And I find that it helps people when they're in the throes of this destabilization that happens during the discovery of an affair. And not that you would even begin to talk about this, but over time, it helps people really understand, okay, there were reasons for this. And if we can really address the underlying reasons and do that work, then there can be a whole new next chapter, whether that's individually or together as a couple. There's a lot of hope in it, I find.
Yeah. And I'm just curious, what do you see more of? Do you see people coming to you saying, I kind of felt like this was going to happen. There were some signs. Or do you find more people coming to you that were totally blindsided, had no clue that their partner was having an affair?
I see it all.
Yeah.
I see both sides of it. But it is interesting because oftentimes you hear from one person saying, like, I had a hunch something was going on, but I didn't know what it was. I would have never believed this. And so, but there's some data, there's some emotional information that's telling them something is not quite right here.
Yeah.
But then there are other people who are like, I would have never believed this in a million years. I had no idea. And that also then tells you either something about the way that the person was able to split off this part of themselves, or it really tells you about the communication style and the attachment system of the relationship, where maybe there was just an avoidance of really knowing each other on a deep level. So that's diagnostic also. There's a lot of information in that in and of itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I want to know if you could leave one message for the next generation, so like our Gen Zs or Gen Alphas, about intimate health and relationships, what would that message be and why does it matter right now?
It's such a great question. I think I would say stay curious about your needs and your wants and your preferences, both relationally as well as sexually. Stay curious about that, become educated about it. Keep as much open conversation and communication as possible, especially with sex. To me is never about sex. It's also emotional, it's relational, it's historical, it's political. There's so much inside of it. And if we can keep that in the forefront of our minds instead of trying to narrow it down into something. It just allows for so much self-discovery about ourselves, about our partners, which is really what keeps the dialogue open, which keeps things fun and interesting, which keeps things alive.
Oh, that's great advice. I love it. All right. Well, if you're watching this and you want to learn more from experts like Juliane Maxwald, check out our upcoming events on sexualhealthalliance.com. Thanks for being with us today, Juliane.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
All right. Bye, everyone.